happy weekend and happy new year. Thank you so much for joining again for this week's Aspire to Lead episode. I have two phenomenal leaders that we're speaking to. Today we have Susan Rosenthal and Tessa Brock, who are two podcasters of the Dips of Doubt. We're going to be diving into a ton of leadership topics, but before we do that, I have a few announcements for you. A week from today, Saturday, January 18th, myself and Charlie Peck have the wonderful opportunity to present on the language of behavior. Language of Behavior is a brand new book that will be out in about a month with Connected Ed Publishing, and we're going to be presenting at the 2025 Thriving Educators Summit. This is presented by Organized Binder and my friend Mitch Weathers, who has been on the podcast many, many times. This event is free, and you can reserve your spot today over at organizedbinder.com/TES25, and I'll make sure that the link is in the show notes for you. There's going to be a ton of presenters and a lot of wonderful and impactful content that's going to be presented at this summit. Next, like I said, Charlie Peck and I have a brand new book called The Language of Behavior, and we're going to be announcing some really exciting dates here. One being the book cover reveal, but then also the launch of the Language of Behavior book. If you want more information on that, head over to joshtamper.com/language of behavior. Our podcast is hosted there. Information about us and the presentations that we do, but then also a pre-sale link for you to be able to get more information on the book, and then also an opportunity for you to be on the Language of Behavior newsletter, where we provide additional strategies for educators, regardless of your role, on how you can support students through difficult behaviors. Now, with that, I'm going to jump into this conversation with Susan and Tessa, who I've been connected with for over a year. Both of these folks are fantastic educators, leaders, people, creators. We're going to be talking about the Dips of Doubt podcast, why they coined this phrase. We're going to talk about seasons in leadership, and Susan does a wonderful job of identifying the cycles that occur throughout the school year, and then also the evolution of a self-aware leader. Tessa's just going to go through 3 steps of self-aware leadership, which is reflection, evaluation, and cultivation, and how it applies to any leader, both aspiring and current leader. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. I have two phenomenal educators, leaders, and people. I've been blessed to be with the two of them for the last year. I've grown by listening to their special podcast that's out, Dips of Doubt, and I'm super excited to have them on the show. Susan and Tessa, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you, Josh, for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Awesome. So before we begin on a whole host of leadership topics, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background in education and leadership. So Susan, would you kick us off with sharing just a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. And prior to joining Pima County School Superintendents as the director of Lead Now, I worked in Catalina Foothills School District for 30 years, where I had the opportunity to really participate in a K-12 experience as a principal, assistant principal, and as a first and second grade teacher. From there, I had the opportunity to be involved in creating new teacher programs, participating in supporting the Career Ladder program, which was based off of Action Research, and that's a really old program. Our state does not have that anymore. And then from there, I just continued to find my passion for working with new leaders and aspiring leaders when I joined Pima County School Superintendent's Office, where I now have 3 different programs where I support leaders. Love what I do and love the opportunity that after retirement of 30 years there, I've been at Pima County for 7 years, paying it forward and supporting leaders. I have my NAESP mentor certification, which supports the work that I do. Tessa, what about you?
Oh, beautiful. I love Susan. Just so excited to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Tessa Brock, and for the last 24 years, I have been the lead mental health coordinator for a federally funded program that works in education. And my role has been to go into classrooms that had what are perceived as behavioral challenges, but really to work closely with the educators And what I have been able to distill down, that my work has really been about helping the educator become much more self-aware of what's going on inside of them so they can be the best version of themselves for the student who is having the hardest time. And so it's really been about supporting educators in tuning into themselves so that they can regulate their brain enough to be the responsible adult that will help the student who's struggling. And so then from there, I've really been able to do a lot of professional development. I've been doing a ton of speaking across the country and really taking it outside of education and really moving into organizations where I've taken that trauma responsive lens that I've cultivated over the years, taking that into organizations and taking it to leaders and groups of people who really want to have a better version of themselves showing up when the stakes are high and emotions are high. So I work on communication and supporting workplace culture. And so much of that is grounded in what I call self-aware leadership. And so I have absolutely loved being able to team with Susan because the two of us get to come together and put our ideas together around helping both educators and the organizational space as well.
All right. So I already mentioned it. You both have a wonderful podcast called the Dips of Doubt podcast. For my listeners and my audience, if you haven't checked this out, make sure you head over after this interview and jump on your favorite podcast platform and dive into the many episodes that are there. They release every Monday and Wednesday, and they're short, they're sweet, but they have huge impact as far as the message in each episode. And so I would love, real quick, Susan, I know that you coined this phrase, Dips of Doubt, and I'm curious where it came from and kind of what it led to in your own work.
Thanks, Josh. The Dips of Doubt theme came from the idea that as leaders, we all have those moments of doubt, that we are all thinking we're imposters at different times. And so you just got to get through it. And honestly, the work came from Ellen Moore years ago when I worked with new teachers and saw the dips of doubt that new teachers had, and realized that translates to administrators also, and that we all go through those dips.
Tessa, I want to go back to a term that you had talked about real quick. So you had said something about a self-aware leader. And I know you do work with that, and there's kind of an evolution to that piece, but will you just share out again where that concept came from and then how, you're working with leaders to be self-aware within their work?
Yeah, situations come up, and it's so easy for us to accidentally always make the other person the wrong person, or they're the bad guy, or they're the one who did all the things. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in that moment. And if we pause long enough to kind of take that deep breath and reflect on what's really happening, most of the time it's a story that we have in our head about the situation or about the person, but we're stuck in our own our own stuff. And so if we can pause long enough to notice that, normally we can take a step back, take a bigger view, and really realize what's going on inside of me, and then really thinking about what might be going on for the other person, and how can I kind of take a higher road, a better version? How can I have better perspective to be more impactful in this moment? Because I think that when I don't know if it's our culture or if it's our society, but we typically our automatic knee-jerk response is to make the other person the wrong bad guy. So if we can pause that long enough to realize that I'm bringing something to the table too, what am I polluting the water with? And how can I clean that up as quickly as possible so that I can maintain relationship and create the results that I'm really wanting, rather than have to spin in the muck of this moment? So that self-aware leadership is really just that process of looking inside and then pausing long enough to have different responses, and then figuring out the more I do that, the more that behavior becomes contagious, because people start picking up on that's my way of being, and that's how we do business together.
Yeah. Susan, within the podcast, I know you are very cognizant about making sure the topics are relevant to the time of the school year for our leaders. And I'm just curious, what you think in regards to the various seasons that a leader has to go through as we kind of navigate through a typical school year.
Well, I believe that as principals, as leaders in schools, that there are definitely cycles in education. And those cycles impact how you think about your work and impact how you move through the work. And so when we're getting ready to start the school year, there's this incredible excitement and you're off and running. And then you're running so much that you realize I can't keep up at this pace. And you just keep moving through the year. And I think if you can recognize that there are seasons, just like there are seasons of the winter, spring, summer, fall kind of thing, you can help yourself to understand that sometimes they're going to be busier, but you will get to the next season and you will understand that the seasons come and go and you will get through it, and not to give up hope during some of those tough seasons, like what we just went through in November and December, right? Where the work is mounting and those evaluations are due and those difficult conversations are due and everybody just wants to get to their break. And now we're on the other side of that and people are feeling refreshed, rejuvenated, and ready to roll.
All right. So I want to correlate that with what we're talking, Tessa, with the self-aware leaders. So, as we're looking at the different seasons, like Susan was talking about, is there any way to really focus on the self-aware leadership? I know there's like 3 steps, right? The reflect, the elevate, the cultivate piece to that. But what would you advise folks that want to be a self-aware leader and maybe have those various seasons that they're having to go through?
Right. I love it. So one, I think that it's fun that this is coming out at the beginning of the year because it's really the perfect time to pause and reflect and really think about what is it like to be on the other side of me? And am I being the leader that I want to be? Am I being effective? Am I having the impact that I want? Am I building and lifting others up? Or am I accidentally critical and accidentally, undermining or disempowering people? So I think we really want to pause and just like, who am I and how am I showing up? And then I also think that we can then look forward and say, so I work really hard not to make whoever we are or however we are wrong or bad. It's just information and it's data. And so how do we acknowledge where we are and then set our sights on where do we want to be? And so looking forward, we want to be able to think about as I look at my own behavior and set my goals for this year about who I want to be, I want to be paying attention to how do I put practices in place so that I'm really paying attention to what is it like to be on the other side of me in any interaction on a regular basis. So I'm really reflecting on that. And then I'm looking at how do I really elevate my skills? How am I intentional in my conversations? How am I making sure that I'm reflecting on each conversation? So really paying attention to the skills and the strategies and the behaviors that are showing up inside of me, and then noticing that and tweaking them and improving them as I'm moving forward. And then lastly, really just the more I practice that, the more I become amazingly contagious, because the really fascinating thing to me is that we are contagious whether we like it or not. So we just like people will be picking up on our energy, our influence, and we can either be positive or negative, but they're going to be picking up on however we are, whether we like it or not. So I love the idea that when we reflect and then we are really elevating our skills and our approaches and our behaviors, then we can really cultivate a very different environment because now we are becoming contagious in an intentional way. And I think things start to beautifully change as we move forward.
No, I love it. All right. So Susan, with the work with the podcast, I'm curious as to the goal and the direction that you all are moving here in 2025 as you're continue to support leaders, both aspiring and current leaders.
Well, we hope for 2025 that people tune in and are able to take a nugget away with them. That if you're having a bad day, we lift you up. If you're feeling like you need some guidance on a topic that we've touched, you revisit it. That it's an opportunity to continually get a quick shot in the arm, a dose of energy to brighten your day, because we all know we have those dips of doubt. We have those tough days. And if we can, in 5 to 10 minutes, help you recognize that this is normal and this is the evolution of leadership, that it's hard and we're here behind you and encouraging you and hoping that you take away an opportunity to know that you're not alone.
Yeah, that's huge. This is going to go back to what Tessa was talking about. But Tessa, with my last guest, for those who are listening, I had Greg on last week, and he was talking about ego and how sometimes that is a hidden issue within us and our leadership journey. And you were talking about kind of like societal, that popped in my head in regards to your self-aware leadership, that sometimes we are the one that's getting in our own way. And maybe that might be something that people need to reflect on moving forward, especially our young leaders in 2025.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to notice that and not make it wrong or bad, right? Because I think that as when I was a young leader, I thought I was supposed to know it all and be the best at everything. And there was this unconscious competition that if anybody below, like in the hierarchy of things, that was better than me, like I felt like I was supposed to figure out how to get better than them because as a leader, I was supposed to know it all. And I think as I have gotten older gracefully, right? Like the more we move on, the more we mature, the more we're able to really identify that really true leaders are finding ways to empower and let the people around them shine their brightest light. And so it's not that ego competition of I have to be the best. It's really about where are my strengths? How can I shine? And who around me is better at things that I'm not as good at? And how can I lift them up? I love that quote, lift others as you rise. Because for me, that's really about, I think the more we can get our ego out of the way. So to just notice when the ego shows up, it's not wrong or bad. Just like, oh, there you are. I have a dear friend who names that part of them. And so it could be like, ego Egbert or whatever. And so like, oh, Egbert, there you are again. Hello. Right. What do we need to do to calm you down so that Tessa can show up now? And so I just think most of us are really high achievers and we want to do the very best job we can. And so often we get in our own way because we think that we have to either be perfect or better than. And I think if we can just be more compassionate and empathetic with ourselves, give ourselves some grace, then I think that suddenly there's more room for more people. And that doesn't take away from our leadership. It really allows us to let others shine.
All right, Tessa, I want to talk about projects real quick before we dive into some advice. But I know you had said that you're a keynote speaker and you're a coach, you do workshops. So as you're moving forward, how are you supporting our leaders, but then also potentially campuses and school districts?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are interested in working at all with me, I have a website, www.tessabrock.com. And yeah, I think my passion is to facilitate aha moments. Like there's nothing that's more energizing for me than to be able to put some pieces together that maybe in a way that people haven't thought about it before. I remember doing a workshop several years ago where there was someone who stood in line at the end and they came up and they said, I haven't talked to my sister in 7 years and I'm going to go make a phone call. Right. And that's the stuff that I'm like, we get so accidentally, unconsciously caught up in our own garbage. And if we can just pause long enough to just notice what those things are and then have enough of the right skills, and maybe they're not even hugely different, but just different skills that will support us in having better relationships. This is a hard, messy world to navigate at times. And it's people are messy. And so I think my passion and what I'm really excited about doing is being able to either find ways that we can just make it not so heavy and hard, and also find ways for us to be able to stay in relationship better. It's just, I feel like in the world today, it's harder to stay in relationships sometimes. And with the polarizing social media and all of that. And I think the more we can do a better job of just noticing when we're getting activated, owning it, and then shifting it. That's what I love to do because we get to then stay in relationship with people that we don't necessarily like or get along with as well, but we have different strategies on how to navigate that differently.
So I'll make sure that I have that link in the show notes for everyone. Make sure you're clicking on that. And then, of course, there's going to be additional information and resources on that website for you. Then I also want you to head over to the Dips It Out podcast. I'll have the link there for you to click. Make sure you're subscribing and tuning in each Monday and Wednesday for these two amazing leaders, providing just a little glimpse of hope for you as we can't do this work alone. Susan, I'm going to throw it to you as I'm going to ask my favorite question of the episode, which is just an actual item. It's great that they're tuning in and, grabbing some wisdom from the two of you, but I also want them to go out and do something to enhance their leadership journey. So if they're to do something tomorrow or the next week to really enhance themselves as a human being, as a leader, what would you recommend them do?
Great question. I have so many thoughts I would like to give, but
let's go, Susan. Let's do a top 20. Let's go.
I could do it. I think what's so important is to remember it all comes down to relationships. And so as we begin a new year, if you need to rebuild or maintain or establish, it's never too late. And it all in schools comes back to those relationships that you have. And so as you walk your journey forward this next year, remember that you make a difference, but remember you make a difference by building relationships, building trust, and supporting those that you deal with every day, because you don't know what's in their backpacks. And by stepping into their shoes for a moment and remembering it's about relationships, anything is possible.
All right, Tessa, what about you?
Oh, what comes to my mind kind of through this conversation, it's really about how do we find ways to be more compassionate with ourselves. And, we're in the new year, and many people probably have already made New Year's resolutions, and many of them have probably broken a lot of these resolutions. And so I really think it's about finding ways to be more compassionate with ourselves. I remember through the days of COVID, there was so much conversation about self-care, self-care, self-care. It is so incredibly important. And I think so many of us skimp on that and don't do a good enough job. And I also think that through that journey, what I also learned is that, in my opinion, the foundation of self-care is self-compassion. And really to have love and care and treating ourselves well and with thoughtfulness, right? Like we want to make sure that we are treating ourselves the way that we treat people that we love and care about and adore. And I remember someone telling me years ago that the only person, when you are born, the only person you are really charged with taking really good care of is yourself. And most of us don't do a great enough job with that. We deserve so much more love and self-care. And so I think that when you hear the word self-care, don't go to the, oh, there they go again on self-care, but it's really about self-compassion, and it's really about self-love. And what are the kind little tiny things that you can do to nurture the love that you can have for yourself? Because I think that when we give ourselves more grace, that allows us to slow down. It allows us to make mistakes, but it also allows us to learn from them. And I think when we are able to fail forward, be brave, try stuff that's uncomfortable, but know that there's nothing that's going to happen we can't bounce back from, right? We've been through tough stuff before, and we'll make it through the mistakes that we make here. And so just to have more trust and faith in ourselves and give ourselves some grace and wiggle room, because when we care deeper about ourselves, I think we take better and greater risks, and then we have more success.
I love it. I want folks to be able to connect with you if they have any questions, or maybe they want to, Tessa, like we talked about your projects, maybe bring you out for a keynote.
I love that.
What ways would be best to either connect with you on social media or head over to your website?
So for me, if you want to reach out to me, I love to do executive coaching. I love to do workshops. I love to do keynotes. My website is really the easiest way to contact me, or my email address is super easy. It's tessa@tessabrock.com. And so I would love to reach out if there's anything I can do to support you. This is a important journey, and it can be messy and hard sometimes, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And as leaders, we have an opportunity to really make a profound difference in the lives of those that we are working with. And I think the more intentional we can do that, the more empowered everyone can feel. So I would love to reach out and be connected if you're interested. Also on social media, I would love to be connected as well.
So feel free to reach out to Pima County School Superintendent's programs, Lead Now. If you're interested in having support as a new leader or aspiring new leader, we have several programs there under Lead Now. Or feel free to email me at susan.rosenthal@pima.gov.
Make sure that you reach out to these wonderful leaders. Like I said, Susan and Tessa do a phenomenal job, not only on their podcast, but supporting folks all over this country. Make sure you're tapping into all of their experience, insight, and wisdom, because I've been connected with them for over a year. They're two not only incredible leaders, but incredible people. They have genuine hearts. They're there to serve and to make education as a whole better. And I just appreciate the two of you, the work that you're doing, and super excited about the Dips of Doubt and the direction you all are going for 2025.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.